Okay, we should be live. I assume the chat on YouTube will let us know if there are any issues, but yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So, to kick us off, we have the agenda here. This is issue 1154 in the PM repo. This is consensus layer call 142. Thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, there's quite a bit to get through today, so let's just go ahead and dive in. So to get started, let's think about Pectra, and perhaps we can just quickly go through any updates for Devnet 3. Devnet 3 has launched, which is super cool. I think we had some bad block testing that we did, which caused a little turbulence, and it'd be interesting to hear an update from the results of that. Anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Yeah, we had Marius's bad block generator, and mainly the chaos seems to be limited to Bezu. Is someone from the Bezu team around to maybe give an update?
I can give an update, yeah. So the fuzzing yesterday created signatures that were 0, then hexadecimals 0x00. Bezo has a rule internally that a signature has to be at least 1. So we reject any transactions with those signatures. I'm currently updating this, so I've opened a PR to fix the issue and to accept the signatures. As once as yeah, that's fixed, I think we should be able to join again definitely.
Cool. Any other Devnet 3 issues? Otherwise, I was looking the other day, it looked pretty healthy, so that was exciting to see. Okay, cool. Then we'll move to the next item on the agenda. And yes, this is discussing the split of Pectra into possibly 2 forks. We had discussed this on last week's ACD and kind of had asked at least for everyone to have a view on their preference for how to split this into 2 for reasons that were given there. And yeah, I guess we'll just go ahead and open the floor. Yeah, Itan put this in the chat. Thank you. So I had a document here that was essentially one way to split up what we have now. My thinking was essentially like, yeah, I mean, I guess where to start is like Pectra, again, is like one of the largest forks that we have scheduled as it currently is ever in Ethereum's history. So for many reasons around reducing risk and just, overall success of actually executing a hard fork, it makes a lot of sense to split it into 2. I think also given just development progress of other features we've been discussing for Pectra, like PureDOS or EOF, there's like a pretty natural split between sort of what's on Devnet 3 today and the other things we've been discussing. So yeah, I guess maybe to get us started with the conversation here, does anyone disagree with what I laid out in the notes? Is there like a different proposal that anyone would like to discuss? Are there EIPs maybe that you would want to see in like this first Pectra that aren't in this note? Happy to hear what people think. Yeah, Andrew?
Right. So we have an Aragon's perspective on the Pectra split. I'm basically I'm posting the write-up. It was written by our team member Somnat. Somnat, are you on the call? Maybe not. And I can, if not, I can briefly summarize our position. So we basically were against it, and there are a few reasons. So on the face of it, it makes sense, but essentially we worry that splitting Pectra into two will lead to two fully blown forks, and people will use it as an opportunity to include more EIPs into the second fork. There might be interactions between various EIPs of the two forks, and that will introduce a lot of interference and last-minute decisions. And we also want to get our priorities straight. So if we think that Verkle is important, then we should prioritize Verkle rather than kind of other random EIPs. And also, if we try to do, if we basically if we implement many EIPs, it might be successful in some sense, but it actually also detracts resources from our engineering resources on working on other improvements to the clients, like tackling things like state growth or code efficiency or and so on. So trying to cram as much ifs into, say, two forks, it may be not exactly a success story. And basically, we propose to keep EOF in Pectra, given that actually there is a lot of momentum on EOF. I'm thinking that if PIDAS is not ready, we can have a CL-only fork, or if PIDAS requires some trivial changes on the EL side, that should be fine because it won't hinder our progress on Verkle much. But yeah, I agree with Somnat, and I would rather avoid Pectra too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key risk here is we would say, okay, Pector's big, we'll split it into two, and then we essentially don't have the discipline to keep the second part as is, and then yeah, it becomes a whole separate fork. There's a delay, with that just necessarily, and that's not great. So I don't know. The way I would mitigate that risk is we just commit even today to saying hey, we will break it into two, but essentially there's not any room for new features. If there's some EIP that complements something in Pectra A or Pectra B, then sure, that's those would make sense. But the point is not to just push everything to a second fork, or push some things to a second fork and then open the can of worms of hard fork scheduling again in say 6 months. Any other thoughts? Yeah, you talk.
Personally, I'm also in favor of the split, just because I'm looking at it from a PeerDAS perspective, and at this stage it seems like that it got descoped so much that it's essentially like the subnet DAS, but the DAS part is also removed now, so it's just splitting the data among nodes and hoping that it sort of works out with the availability without any sampling. So I'm not sure. I mean, not fully removed, but yeah, it just appears to me that it's not ready as all the other features that have already been implemented, like the attestations, the validator requests, MaxEB. I don't think that delaying all of that, which is beneficial for users today, is warranting to wait until both PeerDAS and EOF are fully ready and fully battle tested.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the justification for the two forks. And then just to surface several comments in the chat, even like Ansgar's here, that is the last message. Essentially, it's just like, hey, if we like this will be most successful if we commit to like a very strict scoping. And so that really means like, yeah, there's no room for like it's not that we are picking Pectra, then we're going to pick the next fork, and then now we can decide what goes in the next fork. It's like kind of acknowledging we've already decided that we have two hard forks worth of EAPs, and this is what we ship. POTUS.
Yeah, so I don't agree with like being strict on the scope, and B, even if I did agree, I don't even trust that we would be strict on the scope. We set to scope Pectra very early, much a few months before we went to Kenya. And we were very clear that we wanted to have a very small fork because it didn't need to delay Fergal. That was the commitment. That was an agreement that all teams went at async and proposed a list of changes. Prism didn't even favor max EB on the first change. And then we had this monster fork that now we're trying to split. If we were about to have this large fork, then we would have pushed for a very different set of EIPs. So I find it not only unfair, I find it just simply wrong to already be committed for the next two forks, because this fork actually is, for any practical matters, a two fork.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I think I kind of in line. My thinking kind of line with POTUS, and I I think why we can just think slightly differently. We can just say, look, we have these features from the list that are quite ready, and there are a couple of features that doesn't look that will be ready very soon and will delay. And let's ship these features in the next fork. I mean, for myself, this thinking that it's possible to split the Pectra into two pieces, and the second piece will be the same, exactly the same as we think now. I think it's a bit unrealistic. So if we just change the thinking, where we just simply say that, look, there are a couple of features, a few features that needs to be pushed to the next hard fork, and that's all. So that would be my idea.
Right. And yeah, just to chime in with what Marius is saying here in the chat, like there's at least two things here. One of them is just, should we focus on Pectra being essentially the Devnet 3 set of features? We work over the next couple of months to like get everything polished, start thinking about testnet timing on the way to mainnet. The other thing is, okay, yeah, the scope of, say, the second fork. I hear everyone that, yeah, it could be tricky to not want to put new things in. I would lean towards, again, keeping the scope very small, just because then that's going to maximize our chances of actually shipping a second fork very quickly with respect to this first one, say Pectra A. So that all being said, let's maybe take these separately. So is anyone opposed to saying that the next hard fork, call it Pectra A or even just Pectra, will essentially be the Devnet 3 set of EAPs? I think there's general agreement on that point, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm very much in favor of that.
Thank you.
I think Aragon was the only team voicing their opinions that we should split the fork.
Gotcha. Ita?
I mean, generally, yes, it's just this the 7688, which I think should be in the same one that adds these validator requests. Like the re-indexing on the CL side.
Right. So Yeah. Again, I think it's gonna really complicate things to like think about adding more things to Pectra A. But we can have the conversation. Does anyone else feel strongly, like in particular, different client teams? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like the 7.7, I think it's 6.8 changes. And yeah, Eton, maybe just to add a little context. This is the stable container set of features, but essentially just with like the CL scope.
So my perspective is that like a big benefit of splitting the forks, like a reason to do it is that we have something that's finalized. And so like we could do it quickly. So I would be against adding stable containers to that, especially because there wasn't like a huge push outside of the like core dev calls, I guess, from people who want that feature. So yeah, I think it makes sense to just like go with Devnet 3, don't add things. It might actually ship quickly. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I tend to agree myself. Andrew?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to split fewer cell changes like PI does into a separate fork because, that might entail some like minor changes. Okay, I'm not sure, but say PI does entail some trivial changes on the EL side that shouldn't be that big a problem. Why? Basically, I worry about hindering the progress on Verco. So we on the L side, at least I think so. We need some headspace to concentrate on Verco. That's why I propose to keep EOF in Pectra so that we can ship it. But I'm happy to have PIDAS and other CL changes in a split fork.
Okay. My understanding is that EOF is not quite to the same sort of developmental milestone as the Devnet 3 EIPs. Anyone disagree with that take?
We have patches out for Geth to pass all the EESP tests, and we have Besu and Rep are ready to implement. Nethermind isn't far away, so we're not too far from being able to execute a DevNet with at least 3, but we aren't 100% across all the clients yet.
Okay, thanks. So, I mean, essentially, I understand the urgency to ship EOF, let's say, but I just think given all the other considerations, it would make more sense to keep it out of this first Spectra. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that we're generally on board with DevNet 3, essentially moving on to be the next hard fork. Yeah, obviously there are other things to consider, but I think that's the direction we should move in. I don't know if we want to then turn to talking about scoping the second fork. It might be a little premature. Yeah.
Well, I think the counterpoint to saying that it's premature to scope the second fork was what you mentioned earlier, that if we don't do it now, the commitment to that fork we risk scope creep of, the same exact problem we had with this first Pectra.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't work on the scope of the second fork just yet, precisely because like Matt just said, it's going to be a creep, but more importantly, there's going to be things that change. We're just going to add some bike shedding before that. That is not necessary. What we need to do now is ship that fork.
Right. And, to address Matt's point that was just made, I like the way at least I would think about it is like essentially I would try very hard to stick to Pectra B being just pure DOS and sort of the blob set of EIPs along with EOF. That being said, it'll be a conversation, and just going from the chat and things said here, it sounds like it will be hard to sort of commit to just that for the second fork. But I think we should all keep in mind that the more we touch or change the second fork, the longer it will take to ship. Hopefully we have it sooner than 9 months, Marius. Okay, so I guess this is final call. Let's move ahead with Pectra being Pectra A, which is essentially Devnet 3.
Just
Can
to
we all live with that?
Well, just to clarify that we have a number of things to modify those EIPs. So we don't really mean Devnet 3, we mean Devnet 4, but with those EIPs, right? Or 5 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good point. So there are a number of open points still, even with the DevNet 3 scope. Some of them we'll get to later in the call. But I essentially mean, yeah, just like that EIP set or that feature set.
So where do you want to put stable container stuff, into Pectra 2 or which one?
Well, I mean, I think it's a conversation with everyone here. I think, yeah, Pectra 2 is a natural target.
My understanding, it's as good as ready in most clients, and it actually has user interest as well. Like contract developers have problems with this today, so pushing that back seems kind of pointless. It's also CL only.
Right. So, I mean, the question for me, I would think, is just like even if it sounds ready and it's maybe a relatively small set of, say, code change, just doing this, like, again, kicks us down, like it moves us further away from getting to like a stable Pectra with like a spec freeze and all of this. And, that's not the end of the world, but I think it's a decision that we should make intentionally. Are there other client teams other than Nimbus who feel strongly about this? I believe it's 7768, the stable container EIPs.
Sorry. I feel like even though most clients have implementations, maybe all clients at this point, there's still a degree of like testing. Like we have to update the spec tests, add specs, spec test specific to it. And then just the fact that it's not as battle tested, we'd have to do fuzzing on it. So it's like it does add more work to what we have, even if we're mostly like dev complete. So in my opinion, we should put it in the second Pectra fork, but yeah, it's my opinion.
Thank you. Guillaume?
Yeah, so I did implement stable containers on my own library like 2 months ago. Yeah, it looks cool, but I just wonder if it's worth shipping before we actually need it. And okay, I for one haven't understood why we need this. Okay, except for Vertical actually. But apart from that, is there an actual need right now to ship this?
It's the 4788 smart contracts and client applications. Like Rocket Pool has a decentralized staking pool, and they want, without any multi-sig, to be able to prove, for example, that the validator was activated. So they want to prove relative to the beacon state root that the validator is now there, that it's not slashed, and access that information from the smart contract. So what they have to do today is that when unrelated stuff gets added, such as like consolidation requests or whatever, the size of the structure changes of the beacon state, and they have to keep updating the code every single fork, even if only stuff changes that doesn't affect them, right? It's like if you install a new OS update and you have to recompile all your apps every time, even if none of the APIs change that you're actually using. So that's what's being addressed here. It's a benefit for the couple users who want to use like verification in a smart contract relative to the beacon state. For ourselves, the core developers, we don't benefit that much from it. Like we can optimize a couple of things by having fewer hash computations if it's like an optimized implementation. But the main benefit is for like those developers and indirectly also the users of the ecosystem, because it's easier to create trust minimized applications when you have lower maintenance effort. But I agree, it's not like the prime most important feature. The only reason why it's is a good timing in the Pectra is because this re-indexing on the beacon state is already happening for other reasons. So all those teams that rely on EIP 4788 have to update their code, have to redeploy the contracts based on new indices. And that's why the timing is like tied to those request EIPs. We can obviously also ship it separately, but it means that users will have to go through the migration step yet another time. Yes, the deposits and the withdrawals are more important, of course. But I don't think they are mutually exclusive. The stable container is a CL only feature.
Right. So then the question becomes like, do we, for this particular set of users, say at 4788, do we like potentially delay Pectra even more to account for them? And I don't know. I think maybe to like recenter things a bit, I'll echo what Tim is saying here. Like the whole idea with the split is to ship the next hard fork as quickly as we safely can. And, I think what that means is we really stick, like we really should stick to like a very strict scope. Like I think it's already going to be tricky to get to like, say, spec freeze of first Spectra, in the next couple, say, month or two, like next couple weeks, like ASAP, just as is. And like, yeah, I hear that it's, the devnets for the EIP has been going, like, code's generally ready or mostly ready. Like I hear that, but every little thing will just push out timelines further and further. So yeah, I hear all of that. I would lean towards deferring to a later fork. Okay. There's a number of different views in the chat. Yeah, seems like we're kind of slow on this. Essentially, do we keep things as is? Or do we want to think about including this SSZ EIP into the first Spectra? Okay, there's more chat going on. Sorry for the silence. I'm trying to catch up. I mean, maybe to ask this question, like, if we do commit to Pectra A being DevNet 3 plus polish, is that the end of the world? Like, yeah, I understand that there will be, a little more downstream code change for users, say, of these generalized indices. Do we, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's tricky. But I really do think the right decision here is to think, with a broader scope and just say, hey, yes, this is a sort of consequence of this decision, but ultimately we'll get to a faster Pectra A and just keep momentum generally higher for the protocol broadly. Yeah, Ahmad?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say whatever I said in the chat, which is I feel like it's either we split whatever is CFI'd and slated for inclusion in current Pictra and not add anything extra to Pictra B, or we're gonna end up with basically scoping a whole other fork after this Pictra fork. And we might and everyone is going to end up wanting to add EIPs to that Pectra B fork, and we might end up with Pectra C, and then goes on. Like, I don't know. I don't think this is the right way to go. Either we are strict or we are totally not. Or we stick with whatever we have, sorry, which is sticking with one fork.
Right. And that's the thing is like I think everyone agrees that the current fork is just too big, right? So then I think a split makes sense. And then from there, I think if we do split, what makes the most sense in terms of, again, like very broadly from a very broad perspective, keeping everything moving and sort of our shipping velocity high. Adding more things to especially Pectra A is going to be quite risky. Mark?
Yeah, so if the main difference, like there's a difference here between people who think we can and we can, or that we won't be able to limit the scope, and then there's a split of people that believe like it's worth splitting up if we could limit the scope. I guess like the main question as to whether or not we can do this is, are there enough people that are willing to just not, like in 9 months or whatever, however many months when people are talking about it, are you willing to not let people put anything in, you know? Like if you're on the team that you want it split up and you want us to limit the scope, can you commit to just in these calls not letting anyone add anything?
So I think there's two different things, or more than two different things. But basically, one is do we want to ship something relatively quickly? And I think the only path there is we split Pectra along the lines of what's already been implemented. There's a bunch of stuff that different people want to add for different good reasons. But I think as soon as we open that can of worms, it becomes pretty much untractable. And yeah, so I think Devnet 3 is like the right shelling point for if we want to split today. I think the other question is if we do Pectra B, it's clear that peer dash should be the main thing there on the CL side. On the EL side, I guess there's like some disagreement between the relative priority of EOF and Verkol, and that's probably the biggest deciding factor. And then I think the other thing for Pectra B is like, do we want a bunch of small things come in? And then and yeah, sorry, apologies. By Devnet 3, I mean like the EIPs in Devnet 3, not like the actual spec as is. I know there's like a bunch of changes on all of the, or most of the EIPs. And I think if we commit to like, yeah, assuming we split the fork, on the CL side, it does feel like PeerDAS is the obvious next thing to work on. On the EL side, there's a question between Verkol and EOF, and then there's a question on both sides between do we want like a bunch of other small things to come in the fork or not. And then it doesn't seem, I think it doesn't seem crazy to like try and resolve those things separately. One is to say like, okay, do we want to ship something as soon as possible? And then two is to say, assuming we split it, we're obviously removing EOF from this fork. Do we want this to be the focus of Pectra B? And there's some comments in the chat right now saying that they strongly support that. And then C is assuming, you know, we have PeerDAS and EOF and Pectra B. Are there other small changes that are not like proposed yet that we think are actually quite valuable to include? And how do they affect development timelines? And I think the thing that becomes hard there is like drawing the line at what's like a small change versus not. But they're effectively like three sequential decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just going sort of by that framework, like it does seem like yes, the SEC features are important, like in isolation. They do seem to kind of fall in this bucket of things that, you know, are not quite ready. Say if we want to sort of split off Pectra A today, If only just because, it hasn't been part of core Pectra DevNets yet. Like there'll be tooling updates, like testing, security. There are many things that will need to be part of that process before we want to sort of say this is now in Pectra A. And yeah, it's hard for me to see how we could sort of accomplish the best vision of all of this if we include it in this first fork. So to that point, like I would propose we go ahead and say, again, Pectra A is DevNet 3 plus the polish it needs. We can have the conversation to put the SSD EIPs into the next fork and probably handle the scoping conversation there a different day. Guillaume?
Yeah, I just had an idea. If you want to be able to keep some flexibility for Pectra B while still making sure it doesn't blow up, you could introduce a rule, for example, that if you add an EIP, you have to remove 2 from what is already scheduled. This way, presumably only the better EIPs that everybody can get behind are going to be scheduled, and I think it will make people think twice about pushing new stuff.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really hard to do in practice, but it's an interesting way to think about it. Andrew?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that I don't see why we should join a PIDS with say like the Pectra B on the L side. I'm thinking that they can be developed quite independently because PIDS requires minimal, if not EL changes. We on the L side we'll have to discuss. Assuming we do this Pectra split, then we'll have to discuss whether we do Verkle first or EOF first, because yeah, there is a dependency. But other than that, I would develop. Say we decide to do Verkle before EOF, then I would develop. I would have two sets of test nets for EOF and for Verkle, and then they can progress quite independently. We still have to do some, say for Verkle that might require some minimal CL changes, and the same thing for PIDS, and we'll do that. But the bulk of effort will be quite independent. And then we basically deliver whichever is ready first.
Right. Okay. So how did we start talking about dropping EOF? I don't know if we necessarily did.
Well, my point is that we should have a discussion. Honestly, we'll have to discuss whether we do Verkle first or EOF first. We'll have to have this discussion on the EL side. Right. But I was just saying, assuming that we prioritize Verkle over EOF.
Right. And I mean, again, I would just echo what's in the chat here. Like, I think we can just see which is ready first. From my somewhat limited perspective, just right now, it seems like EOF is much further along than Verkle. But yeah,
I wouldn't be so sure.
No? Okay. So again, before this explodes and we just spend the whole call talking about a future fork before we've even decided the first one, I would like to anchor us to make a decision on Pectra today. And I would strongly suggest we have the understanding that there is features from current developments that would make a lot of sense in the next fork. But yeah, I think we can have that conversation, especially in the context of an EL call, even next week or sometime soon in the future. Dragan?
I think we are starting again, make a decision like in the call. This kind of decision where there is a lot of team that needs to give their opinion. I think they're best done in written form, so we can compare the stances of all teams. For example, in this call, we started talking about Verkle before UF, while the main point of the split was to speed up the preg. So we are jumping from one topic to another topic, depending on the various teams incentives that's productified, but the main point gets lost in that.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
So
Good, how are you?
I would, yeah, I would ask teams to, as Oliver already put it last week, in the writing, say your like stance on this, and we can compare it, and it'll be a lot easier to see the various teams where we are basically going. That's it for me.
Yeah, thanks. That makes sense. Mark, we'll take your comment, and then I think we'll try to move ahead.
Yeah, it does seem like Tim pointed out, there's multiple decisions that go into this one decision, and so, I mean, could we? I like what he said, that we need the teams to get together and do things in writing. So, could we commit to a timeline for deciding the Pectra B scope today? Like not the Pectra B scope, but just like by some time we will decide it, and then it won't be changed after that point, and then we all will get together, put out our arguments, debate, and then we'll have a call and we'll decide.
Yeah, I
And
think
maybe
it's
I mean,
yeah, I think it's tricky to kind of make a deadline, just given everything. You know, if we want to try to have a view on Pectra B in the next 2 weeks, that would be great. We could like, I don't know, like, I think everyone, this is top of mind for everyone, so like, I think naturally it will happen pretty soon. But yeah, it's hard to just like declare a deadline and then just assume that that will happen given all the uncertainties.
maybe a soft. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could just say 2 weeks from now, and then we'll see what happens.
Sure, yeah.
I think there's going to be like, I just think there are a lot of uncertainties into like Pectra B, and so yeah, it sounds like, at least just from the conversation on this call, it sounds like the conversation is a little more complicated than like just split current Pectra into A and B, which is just where my hesitation is coming from. But generally, yeah, I think the faster we can make a decision, the better. So there are other things to get to on the agenda today. So yeah, let's recenter, and there seems to be agreement to split current Pectra somehow. I think there's very strong support to have, again, this like Devnet 3 plus polish idea be the Pectra fork, and then downstream we can figure out what comes next. Can we all agree to this? I have a thumbs up.
Yes.
There were other thumbs up in the chat to this idea earlier. Okay. Let's go ahead and call it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, I guess sort of the takeaway for everyone else is be thinking about Pectra B and expect to have this conversation in the next few weeks. Okay, thank you. Okay, let me look at the agenda. So there are some Blob things to discuss, and yeah, it's a little, we might kind of jump around a little bit, but I think the right way to move forward now is then to turn towards this sort of Pectra A scope. There are a number of PRs open, still in flight for some of the Pectra A features. And let's just touch base on a few of them right now. So this first one I had, Mikhail had this PR. Let me grab a link to it here. He and I were talking about this, and you know, one thing at least that I'm trying to do is, even for like the sort of, again, Pectra A scope, simplify things as much as we can. I think there still are some open questions around, you know, where we can simplify, what makes sense, and how best to do it. One thing that came out of a conversation with Mikhail and I is a way to change how we're handling the move to consolidations for a validator. The way it's currently spec'd is that you can essentially top up as a validator, and if you have a credentials change in your deposit message, then it would like signal to the chain to move you to this new sort of class of validator. This kind of touches a bunch of other things around, weeks of activity, deposit handling, deposit flow, and yeah, it ended up being a little tricky. One simplification here is actually to change how we handle this, and essentially rather than have top-ups and like the deposit flow be the, let's say, infrastructure to surface that signal from a validator, we move it somewhere else. And in particular, the suggestion was to move it to the consolidation pipeline. And one way you could think about this is just if I have a consolidation coming from the EL, if I just say source and target validator the same one, meaning sort of like a self-consolidation, we kind of piggyback on that as a signal to switch to this compounding state. That was a lot. Is Mikhail on the call? He might have other, yeah. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add. This one's kind of hairy, but I just want to bring it up because it does kind of change how we're thinking about this particular feature.
Yep. Thanks, Alex. Pretty much it. And yeah, it also entails an update to the next PR that is on the agenda, to the 6110 PR. It's been updated with removing the switch to compounded from the deposit pipeline. So I think we should wait for this one. We're talking about now to get merged and then merge the 6110 one. That's the plan.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And I put the second PR in the chat. These are kind of coupled because again, it's just trying to like simplify the deposit flow along with this consolidation flow. And again, this does just kind of point to a lot of the complexity even we have in Pectra A today. So that all being said, I think the ask here is just recognize that we are changing this feature a little bit in terms of how you would move from a validator to a consolidated validator or consolidating validator. So yeah, please take a look at the PR. That would be 3918 that I put in the chat here. And the idea is that this one would be merged and then it kind of should further simplify this next PR 3818. And this has been an issue even from earlier this year, even like interop around handling the deposits and making sure that the load on the beacon chain cannot become too much. So these are core changes that we need to resolve. And yes, please take a look. I don't know if there's anything else to add, Mikhail, on the 6110 PR.
Nothing on the PR itself, but just wanted to mention the performance stuff. Yeah, some devs were concerned about having these pending deposits queue, which will be entirely rehashed every epoch processing. So it can cause some probably performance issue. And I just want to ask if we want to check this and do some performance measurements, because before Electra, we do not have the lists in the beacon state that are that we remove elements from the beginning from. So that was kind of the concern, and this is why we wanted to explore some alternative queue designs, to make it always dependent, not removing from the beginning thing. So yeah, just wanted to not ask to forget about this concern. Maybe someone already did some performance measurements and can just share them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if,
yeah, I mean, I look at the performance quite regularly, and hashing is like one of the big things that we do with the state, which takes actual time. The other one being shuffling, right? Those are the two big thieves there. The third one is slightly different, which is basically signature verification on replay of deposits. It's also something we discussed, I think, in Kenya. But I would be loath to add too much hashing because it affects processing in places which are already significantly heavy, such as epoch processing. And often it can't be avoided. It can't be cached away. It can't be tweaked.
Right. So I think the takeaway here is that we should look at this, and this would be a nice target for Devnet 3, Devnet 4, again, around this first Pectra set of features and the polish we do there. Just to get it on people's radar, I think there are at least potential other concerns around not just the deposits, but also consolidations and what is the other one? There's essentially like a number of queues that we're adding to the state, and they're kind of all relevant here. So, when I say DevNet 3 plus polish, this is kind of what I mean is I think there will be a number of things that we need to, ideally, we could even get benchmarks and implementations today and use that to inform where we go from there. So, something to keep in mind. Okay. So yeah, there's those two PRs. Again, please take a look when you have a minute. Next up, there were two more PRs, again in this Pectra A scope around the attestation updates. So as far as I understand, essentially, like the point, actually, let me grab them for the chat. But essentially, it's a number of PRs to make handling attestations easier in clients, just given the changes from, let's see, it's 7549, I think, the attestation EIP. Sorry if I forgot the number, but essentially, these are simplifications, at least as proposed for that feature set. And we had a bit of a temperature check on the last call, and I guess, yeah, I'm just bringing them here again as another temperature check. If we are serious about having these in Pectra, then we should make a decision and keep these moving along. There were some comments on the PRs here around, again, concerns of complexity, and again, we just kind of get back to the same question, like, yes, we could imagine sort of a perfect world, but we might have to stick with a good enough world. Anyone here, if you've had a chance to look at these PRs, it'd be good to discuss how we think about them. Terrence?
I started implementing 3900, which is the single attestation. I think it's a very nice to have. Like it just feels right. It's very clean. But I do worry about like the complexity. So it's just one of those things that from the specs perspective, it looks very simple. But once you like add it to the code base, then you see this cascade of changes that you have to make. I mean, but I do think this is much like easier in terms of complexity versus the attestations one previously. But yeah, I just wanted to make like a minor warning on that. I also do have a question just on the spec side. It only makes changes to the PTP interface, but as a validator, I need to be signing and sending those attestation out, right? This is also part of the honest validator duty change.
Right, with the implication being that, this might sound like a simple change, but it might end up being quite a bit more work than it sounds like, which is also the issue you had with the CIP in the first place. So that's now the call to make. Yeah, where do we sort of draw the line on good enough versus shipping the perfect solution?
So yeah, Eitan was working on this from our team, and he had similar feedback. I think if we wanted to ship the Pectra one quickly, we probably shouldn't include this change, just because it's just like a lot of extra work for like not any tangible gain in the clients. Although I think it's good from like the spec perspective. Yeah, I was gonna say something else, but I forgot what I was gonna say.
Okay.
I can answer the question at least. For the honest validator part, can be updated, doesn't have to. You can convert between the two formats freely. The networking part, like what we put on the gossip channel is important for two reasons. One is the DOS possibility that we close with single attestation, which is very easy to exploit today if we wanted to, if somebody wanted to. And that sort of closes the gap. So that's the immediate kind of benefit that the PR gives. It's a security update, basically. And at the same time, it's also an efficiency update because we'll be spending less CPU processing attestations if we include it, which those that follow performance like hashing takes time. There's a lot of attestations to process, and the more validators we have, the more that particular point grows.
So if validator doesn't do this, then are we expecting they're just like nodes basically will convert to a different format and just forward it again? So you can assume there's like honest behavior in the P2P for this?
To be honest, I didn't I didn't really consider it. If I was looking at it after your comment, I think I would include the honest validator change as well.
Right.
I think that's reasonable.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter for let's say the bulk of the PR, right? It's better to have it in the honest validator spec as well. I agree, but it's not critical. So if we wanted to have kind of a minimum impact on clients change, then you can actually do all the translation in the gossip layer. And then many of these, cascading code changes concerns can be swept under the rug, I would say.
But when you do the translation, you still have to do some CPU cycles and compute, right? So is that less than today, basically? Because when you do the translation, you still have to get the committees. You have to like figure out like which bit to flip in the aggregation field, for example, or yeah, something like that. So there is also compute there, right?
Not really. It's all information that you have. I mean, in order to know whether you're supposed to create an attestation to begin with, you have to load the shuffling because that's what determines which slot you're actually sending the attestation in. So that is all information that you have at hand when you're doing that processing. I agree it's kind of pointless to not make the honest validator change, but it's not strictly necessary. That's what I'm trying to say. And it doesn't affect the prime benefit either, which is that nodes validating the single attestation can do the signature check before doing the shuffling with this change. Those that produce it, they have to get the shuffling regardless. So it's kind of, again, like I appreciate your comment. It's really good. And I think I should update the PR, but that's, that's the nice to have of this change.
Yeah, I think if this PR were to go in, I would definitely prefer the honest validator change as well, just because it feels right to me. But yeah, other than that, I have no strong opinion.
All right, I'll just throw it in there. I think I kind of agree.
Okay, so then to move forward on the doc, if you can add the validator guide changes to this PR, I think that would help people sort of think about it and see the full scope. And I think I'll try to get maybe another client team to look at implementation, at least to like weigh in. And then we could try to make a decision on the next CL call. I think that's a nice path forward, unless anyone disagrees. Okay, cool. So there are those. And then next on the agenda, okay, I want to be mindful of time because there's some other things to discuss, but I did want to bring up again this PR from Felix to think about how we handle the request in the engine API. Yeah, I feel like on the last call, we were pretty close to saying this was good to go. There was an update requested around, I think, some of the ordering semantics, which I believe has been added. Can we go ahead and agree to this change? Or are there any updates or questions we'd have about this change?
There is probably an idea to not keep requests on the EL at all. So because they are now capped by CL, and only keep the requests route in the EL block header as a commitment that will be validated by the EL, given the requests sent from the CL via Engine API. That's probably the alternative to this PR. So EL can compute this request route, so this commitment in a way it wants, and it will not affect anyhow the CL part. I don't know how much do you want to explore towards this idea, but yeah, at least it can be an alternative.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to make a decision on this call. I would hope we can next week. Also, this one goes cross layer, so we'll also want the EL perspective as well. So that might be that for now. If there are any other comments on this set of changes, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay. So next up were a batch of things. Essentially looking now like, okay, we have Pectra A, sort of, again, this Devnet 3 plus different polish things that we've been discussing. There are a number of other PRs. They're all pretty simple, sort of one by one, so maybe I'll just call them out. But there's this one to get rid of the skip payload bodies v2 set of methods. I'll just post this here. Let's see, Mikhail, you had this PR. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add. My understanding was that basically we added this for Pectra when it wasn't as clear how we'd handle the request, and it's just actually simply no longer necessary. So it makes sense to go ahead and delete, which is what this PR does.
Yeah, basically, it's just announce and to do the check if anything is missed, and we should not remove those methods. But I think we should, if there is other opinion, please let us know before the next call.
Okay, yeah, I lean towards merging this even sooner than the next call, but yeah, we'll at least give it a few more days. So please take a look and add any feedback to the PR. And then otherwise, there was a batch of things, essentially, again, around polish for Pectra and kind of saying, with the Devnet 3 feature set, what do we need to do? There's a bunch of things around APIs and connections between, the beacon node of our client. There's the builder pipeline. There's a bunch of sort of peripheral things that are critical and need to be addressed. So I called some of them out. What is relevant here? There was this PR for the engine API, which just reflects how we're going to handle the request, and that's in progress. Another one would be the changes to the beacon APIs. I think there are still a few things there, but let me just drop this in the chat so people can take a look at that. And otherwise, let me grab the builder specs PR as well. Give me 1 second. This one is here. So point being is, moving ahead with Devnet 3 plus polish as Pectra. Now is the time to be thinking about, these various APIs. So beacon APIs, builder APIs, all of the other things. Another one that is relevant is the remote signer and like Web3 signer. I don't know if anyone here on the call is more involved with that and would like to give an update there. It would at least be nice to get a acknowledgement that someone is keeping track of it. Okay, that's okay. We'll follow up async with that. And great. So yeah, again, takeaway here, just be aware of these PRs. There are some sort of minor changes to all these APIs to reflect the latest Pectra EIPs. And that's something we very much want to get settled as quickly as possible so that we can facilitate Pectra mainnet as quickly as possible. Okay. That was more or less it for Pectra. If there's nothing else, we can move on to PeerDOS, and we do have, I believe, a presentation around the blob counts, which then also just kind of funnel back into this fork scoping discussion. But maybe we'll quickly just start with any Devnet updates for PeerDOS. I know they've kind of been in progress for a little while. I don't know if there's anything to update there. First, yeah, on the duck.
Yeah, there's one more spec PR we didn't mention, which is the TTFB timeout thing to get rid of it.
Okay.
I haven't seen anyone against, so maybe we can just go ahead with it.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't looked at this in a little while. Yeah. How about I'll just keep track of this and we can discuss either at the end of the call or probably the next call. But yeah, I agree that this generally looked like it was moving in the right direction to merge. I don't know if anyone else has comments on this right now. Okay, we got it. I like it. But yeah, this would be, I think, pretty in scope for the polish of Pectra. And otherwise, if you're listening, yeah, client teams, take a look at this PR. There's been a good bit of conversation already. But yeah, I believe we discussed this at Interop, and yeah, it seems like everyone was on board. So just one other thing to keep track of. Okay, thank you. Any PeerDOS DevNet updates?
We are working on it.
Okay, great. So yeah, they're in progress, and again, yeah, it just kind of reflects that. Yeah, it's a little bit earlier than in the development pipeline than some of these other things we have going on. Thanks for that. Cool. So then the next thing on the agenda, there was quite a bit to get through today. I think so. Is it Francis? I think Francis should be on the call. I think they wanted to give
Yeah,
a
I'm here.
presentation. Oh, hey. Yeah, I'll just hand it over to you. I think you have want to talk about blob limits for
All right,
a future
cool.
hard fork.
Do you mind I share my screen? That
Yeah,
might be
please.
easy.
Yeah.
Okay, can everybody see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool, thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Francis. I'm from the base team. I'm a protocol engineer there. And it's really great that I have this opportunity to talk to you guys about this. I think we have a lot of time to discuss about like the potential split about Pectra A and Pectra B. It seems like the consensus alignment right now is that Pectra A will take the current Devnet 3 like ready EIPs and ship, and we will put PeerDAS into Pectra B and potentially ship later. So our main point here is about like the blob capacity for like L2s in general. And if we are putting PeerDAS into the next hard fork, which is kind of like 9 to 12 months later, then we think that the current capacity, 3 target blob will not be enough for L2s to scale in the coming months, especially with L2s continuously to grow. And with base, we have this scaling plan to increase our like target gas per second from 10 megagas to like 25 megagas per second till the end of the year. So the point is that the capacity might not be enough, and we would like to recommend a slight modification to the current proposal, like in scope for Pectra A, which is that we integrate a blob number increase into Pectra A. So like, how do we do that? There are two like ways, which is like pretty. I think it's pretty straightforward. The first one is like let's increase the target and max for the blob number. So we can set target to 4 and max to 8. Or we can do just a target increase and keep the max blob number to 6, which helps keep the like worst case scenario like in check. We understand that there are like a lot of concerns around the network bandwidth, especially their effects on the solo stakers. So we did some like very initial analysis, and we would like to share it with everybody here. So regarding the network bandwidth, we are like to be clear, we are using 6 target and 12 max as a like for illustrative purposes, and all the number here right now are average network bandwidth. So there's like really good concerns about the peak bandwidth, and we can get into that a little bit later. But right now, let's talk about the average. So for the past week, the CAL clients, just P2P data and the EL clients, they are using like 400 kilobytes and 140 kilobytes inbound like data for the past week, and for the like outbound data, it's around like 670 kilobytes in total. And we have some data from like ExpandOps team's dashboard that showcases the entire data coming in and out of the like container, which includes the RPC and Beacon API traffic, which you can see is naturally a little bit more than the just P2P data. But the point here is that like P2P data is kind of like the main data in and out of the like CL and EL clients. So if we are adding like 3 extra target blobs to the network, we are going to have like 54 kilobytes of data addition to inbound, and this 384 kilobytes of outbound data to in addition. And if we add them like together, in total, the P2P data in after the blob increase will be 300 kilobytes, and the total P2P data out will be 1 megabyte per second. And this is where I think it's really important to talk about not only average like data, but also the like peak use cases or the worst cases. So if we say that, okay, everybody has to disseminate the blobs like within 2 seconds or like 4 seconds as the current like spec defined, then we can like in worst cases without any other like change like too detailed analysis, we can say that, okay, we can say, okay, for the blob out data, it could be like 3 megabytes per second, or like even like if we have to disseminate them within 2 seconds, it could be like 6 megabytes per second, like counting everything into that 2-second slot. So I guess the question here is that reasonable enough for solo stakers who are like bandwidth constrained? I did some kind of like really quick search around the upload bandwidth across the world. It seems like for the like 200th country, their average upload like speed would be like 3 point something megabytes per second per some like testing network testing websites. So this is just like food for thought. But we believe that if we keep the max in check and only increase the target, you'll be like definitely reasonable in terms of like a target blob increase. So the second point is like for imposing a higher minimum price for blob data, the current argument is that like the validators are not fairly compensated for their compute, storage, and bandwidth required for providing the data availability. And we believe that the problem is definitely legit, but addressing them by constraining the DA capacity is a step in the wrong direction. Instead, we would suggest that a different approach, which is that we can work on something that is both ensures us to have a healthy market for blob space, but also keeps the target blob number unconstrained for L2 to scale. And that, I believe, can be orthogonal to like increasing the blob targets in this hard fork, and can be worked on in parallel, maybe into the next hard fork or the next one. like after that. I believe that is all my presentation. I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on like if you are okay with like going with either of these like choices, or if you have any other concerns. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, no, it's really nice to see, and thanks for putting that together. Yeah, these are interesting options, and it's something we should discuss. Obviously, again, the data facility of Ethereum is one of our most important features, so it's very important to support it where we can. And one way we can do that is think about changing the blob numbers, even in Pectra. To that, I would have to say I'm going to maintain my earlier position, which is just that, you know, we really should leave Pectra as is, work on scope freeze, and not think about changing anything else. That being said, I will just kind of summarize, I think, what's kind of in the chat. In particular, like Ansgar here had a nice message that changing the max, I think, has a lot of implications. Changing just the target is a little more reasonable and is like a much more sort of narrowly scoped change. Yeah, I think that's my take. Would lean towards leaving things alone for Pectra and then just focus on all the blob things in the next fork after Pectra. I would be open to a target adjustment. Anyone else want to chime in?
I wonder if it's worth like, what is the progress on peer-to-peer improvements? Like it feels like there's still a lot of things that we could improve on peer-to-peer to reduce these bandwidths, and like then it would probably be easier to justify increasing both target and max. Is there any update on these things? And
my sense is that that's kind of been thought about under the sort of work stream of PeerDOS. So we have the state there, which is still pretty early. Any other client teams, have you looked into this at all? I think there's like a basket of different things we could think about to help the bandwidth consumption.
I mean, the main thing wasn't there the I don't want discussion where we said like we reduce the peer-to-peer factor on blobs, especially in order to reduce the bandwidth. Like that seemed like a very promising direction. So I wonder if that's like, are we further on that?
It's been merged in the libp2p spec, but the libp2p spec is moving very slowly in these days. Nimbus has an implementation. I know Lighthouse was working on one. I don't know about the others.
Right.
I think both Lighthouse and Prism have the I don't want implemented already. Like yeah, because the underlying libp both in Go and Rust have I don't want implemented already. I think.
Mm-hmm. And have we seen improvements from that or not?
I don't know it has been deployed already or not, but yeah, maybe the client team can talk about it.
I think we haven't shipped it. So it's for the next release. So we can only measure this impact on this in several weeks. It takes a lot of time to users to actually update.
Right. But would it be fair to say if we get like a large saving from this, then we can commit like giving that to L2s in the form of a target and max increase?
So I can just give a random number. It's very easy. We have a dashboard that tracks how much we save, and it's on the order of 40 kilobytes per second right now for I don't want on a mainnet node with standard Nimbus settings at least, which may not sound like a lot, but it's like compared to those numbers that were presented, it actually isn't nothing either. And this number will grow with the number of peers that implement I don't want.
Right.
So it depends on everybody deploying it. It's a feature that needs
Okay, is there
everybody
any
to deploy it.
is there any client that doesn't isn't gonna implement this in the next few months? Okay, sounds like there isn't.
I think there are some, but I don't know which one.
Yeah, it sounds like we don't know right now. POTUS, you had your hand up.
Right.
Yeah, I had like three unrelated or somewhat related comments. So for the first one, to get a good measurement, you don't really need all clients. You need the largest node operators that are running essentially Prism and Lighthouse to update. And then we're gonna get like statistically relevant numbers. And I think regarding your comment, I think everyone would agree that if we have a good measurement and we have like a good experiment that shows that home stakers are capable of taking an increase, then I think it's fine. We can go for it. Although we've been already in situations in which builders were sending target or even under target number of blobs, and home stakers, since the mempool was full, were sending 6 blobs, and home stakers were hurt because their bandwidth was taken. So I think even measuring this is non-trivial. We need to be clear that the average bandwidth is not the right number to look for. We have currently, when you submit your block, you have less than 2 seconds to broadcast to everyone and everyone to validate and consider it available. So again, I repeat that 732 is very far in advance, and it gives you 12 seconds instead of 2. So it solves most of these problems as a no-brainer.
Right. Understood. Yeah. Pre-peer does. There's also the other one, which is that like some clients have implemented that you consider blobs that are in the mempool as available as well. Like, I think that could also be a big improvement, especially for home builders who are only going to consider mempool blobs.
Joe, something to say, Francis?
Yeah, like I think all the like concerns make sense. I'm just curious, like if everybody's okay or like open to, maybe let's just keep the max to be the same so that it fixes the like worst case scenario for all these solo stakers to be the same as currently, and we increase the blob target to a higher number, maybe 4 or 5.
So I have an additional suggestion. I think like what POTUS mentioned, that that currently some builders don't include blobs, and then home stakers pick up the slack, is an artifact of blobs.
I'm not saying currently.
Yeah. But like that is an artifact of blobs having low tips. So I would encourage especially roll-up teams to consider just right now, maybe already, increasing their tip size, because right now, like everyone who includes blobs is essentially already subsidizing blobs because they are not being fairly compensated for the increased orphaning risk that they're taking. So if we had like sort of like some big roll-ups agree that like it's a good idea to pay, say, $5 of tips per blob, I don't think that comes down to anything significant per transaction, but it would probably make a huge difference for the builders on like considering whether they should include blobs.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like great suggestion, and we agree that to have everybody like to have the network fairly compensated for the blob phase is like something we are okay with. So definitely we can do that. But like to maybe a little bit question about this, are we saying that the builders are currently not including blobs as they should?
Well, everyone is free to build their blocks as they like, right? But some builders have, at least in the past, chosen just to not include blobs at all because they said, well, there's no incentive to do it because they don't really pay any fees.
Are we talking about like flashbots, I think previously? So
I think
if that is
getting out of hand, this was an issue a few months ago, and most builders have fixed this issue. Flashbots was one with the serializing issue that is already fixed. R-Sync was another one that was pushing 3 blobs when the home stakers were pushing 6 at the time, but then they moved into pushing blobs as they were. Geth itself had a problem in the way that they computed the tips that favors or it doesn't favor some rollups that have more or less execution. All of these issues, I think, are sort of orthogonal to what we're discussing here.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you, I believe that makes sense, and we've talked with like Crashbot's team to fix that, and the other things might have been like fixed already, like down the pipeline, like, or if they haven't, they would be probably to do it down the pipeline. But like as why we said, we are definitely okay with like increasing the tips to like include to maybe help with builders to include that into their blocks so that solo takers can take less of the burdens on that.
Right. So we are almost at time. And maybe just to get to some resolution for the current topic. It does sound like we need a lot more data, I think, to understand what a safe sort of modification for the blob parameters would be, especially without pure DOS. For scope reasons, and again, just like general momentum reasons, I think we want to touch less rather than more. That would kind of motivate thinking about just the target. And separately, yeah, I think there's a lot of work here, especially if we want to roll out gossip sub changes and all of this. Like that's going to take time. Yeah, so it sounds like we should move ahead on those. Separately, I don't think we'll necessarily make a final call today. And yeah, we'll definitely, I think it's very top of mind for everyone. So we'll definitely revisit this before Pectra hits mainnet. Okay. Yeah, we're pretty much at time. Any closing comments? Otherwise, thank you all for joining. That was quite a big call, but a very important one. So yeah, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you
Take
all
care.
next time.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
bye.